Welcome to Koho Living Spiritual Greatness. I am your host, meiwengel, and I want to invite you on a journey to finding and living your purpose. Knowing and following our inner calling gives our lives meaning and clarity on where our goals are. We're all spiritual beings here on earth to have a human experience. And when we have a focus for this experience, you can create a fulfilled life. Come join me in this movement to make this world a better place by letting go of our fears, old patterns, attachments, and resistance. Do you want to dig deeper into your own purpose? Use the questionnaire linked in the show notes and you will receive a link to schedule your free clarity session with me. But for now, I wish you a lot of inspiration with today's episode. Here we go. We've been having so much fun. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this new episode here on Koho. I'm so excited to interview another dear friend that I've met on Kopanjan, when was it, December 2018, I think. Dear Liz, hi, welcome. So nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So great. Let's start with, can you introduce yourself? Like, what do you do? What's your thing?
So I'm still in, I suppose, discovery, but I am a spiritual seeker, a spiritual coach, a spiritual teacher. At the moment, my main offering is online tarot readings and online coaching. So just doing readings for the moon cycles, doing reads for general energy, and I also do, one-to-one. And that's really where my heart is, because I find that, I'm coaching people through challenging times, giving them insights, or just allowing them to view things differently, giving them a different perspective by sort of having guidance, through the cards and through me. I always find I have things to add on from practical experience, whether that's been from my yoga, my women's empowerment trainings, all these, different tools that come to life when you're coaching people. I'm still exploring my gifts and my service, but at the moment, I'm very much wanting to help people with their, spiritual awakenings and spiritual perspective. I think there's a general disassociation from what spirituality really is, and for me, I've been making spirituality practical. How can it help me? How does it work in a day-to-day life? How does it transform my life practically as well as energetically, and with love and emotion and all those wonderful, beautiful things? But let's get real with it and bring it into the day-to-day. So they're kind of my, I suppose, reasons for being at the moment, is to connect and share those sorts of belief systems.
Yeah, I love that so much, especially that you're saying having a spirituality that fits into our day-to-day, right? Because I feel sometimes, and this is with all respect to all different kinds of things, but I feel that some of us are so much into, I would say, like a normal, life, especially I know that some of our listeners also have corporate jobs, or, like you have a family at home, and it's hard to be the yogi that gets up every morning at 5 o'clock to meditate and do their yoga thing, or so many other different rituals, or qigong or whatever. And it's so important to have people like us, I think, to share, energy and how to integrate all these things in a more day-to-day basis, and not as a, like the monk that sits on the top of the mountain for 5 years.
Yeah, because spirituality is personal. And it's a personal practice, and it isn't rigid. It's not about doing a yoga practice and that becoming a burden on top of whatever else that you're dealing with your life. And it's something, I, as someone who has left the corporate world and fully immersed myself into a spiritual life and practice, even I've struggled, in terms of, why am I doing what I'm doing? It's a new discipline. It becomes a new order of things, but that's not a personal empowering practice. That's just me doing another thing that's requested of me, to show up, to be the best version of myself. So I think for me, spirituality it's when you realize it's doing what you can do to create ease and connection in your life. And maybe that comes for people getting up at 5 a.m. to do their yoga before their busy lives, before the kids wake up. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just comes from giving thanks before you eat your meal, or just being a bit more connected when you walk the dog. So for me, that's what I mean about practical spirituality. You don't have to, I did this, you don't have to run away to India and go and stay in an ashram, to have a spiritual awakening, or to find ease and grace through spiritual connection.
That is so important, because it's like you're taking the, can we call it dogmatism from one world, or the all the pressure, like you said, because you said the corporate world, because I felt it the same. It was like this pressure of, you have to be this way, you have to be that way, and you have to do it in this speed, especially because everything had to be fast. And then you start working in your spiritual, and you find your spiritual group that does that, and then it's the next thing, because there you have to be this way, and you have, like, as a spiritual person, for us especially, because I mean, we as coaches, it's sort of like we have become spiritual teachers. And I remember having this view of the teacher that has to be so enlightened and perfect, and this perfect, how do you say, role model for everybody else. But it feels like it's not really human. It's not really, because if they're that perfect, then how do they know that how I feel? Because I used to be normal, right?
Yeah, but also no one's perfect. I mean, what's this idea that we have that we're striving towards perfection? I mean, we're all sold an image of perfection on our social media, on magazines, on TV, and on the, the big screen. But there is this clawing back, I think, in humanity to say, we know that that's an ideal, and it's actually hurting us now to keep striving towards it. And I have put my spiritual teachers on pedestals. And what I realized a few years, or around when I came back around to this, was it's me externalizing and removing myself from my own connection. I'm saying that they are separate to me, they are better than me, and I'm keeping myself looped in this cycle of, I must do more, I can't reach this standard, or I must do more to reach that standard. And it's all results driven, and that's what we're taught and raised with in the West. Is even spiritual practice, if I think about yoga, for example, the physical dominance of yoga, everybody's talking about this now, this isn't new, I don't think, but the physical preoccupation, to get into headstand, it's all about results driven. And it's not about how do you feel on the mat in that moment. It's you're working towards achieving the perfect pose. And so much of us, of our lives, of our approach to everything, even spiritual practice, is about becoming the perfect ideal, and it just doesn't exist. And you only have to look at the amount of yoga gurus who have been knocked down from their pedestals because of sex scandals, because of human desires, the ego, the power that is part of this world. It's as much in Hollywood as it is in the spiritual world, and that is showing us that darkness, that imperfection is there. And that's the true awakening, is to look at your imperfections and realize that's what makes you the perfect version of you, even when you're not enjoying that experience or expression of whatever it is you consider to be less than perfect.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to, like you said, because in that loop we have that pressure that we put on ourselves. I mean, we put it out there, we put that pressure on a teacher, but we also put it on ourselves.
Yep.
And I think that's where unconditional love comes in, because if I live true unconditional love, I'm going to love myself the way I am, no matter how many perfect imperfections I have or not, right?
Yeah, and how many mistakes you make along the way. We really don't enjoy or accept the process of learning and making mistakes as a growth opportunity. I used to cringe when I used to say, there's no such thing as a mistake, it's a learning opportunity, but it's true. And it's because we're not educated to believe that. You think about the schooling systems, there's a right or a wrong, there's a grade, there's a system where we look at how we're measuring up, as opposed to saying, okay, I got that wrong, what can I learn from it? And actually appreciating that learning experience. I still now, when I learn a new job, I get frustrated that I can't do it straight away. And it's like, why would I expect to master something straight away? But it's, again, I think a symptom of our age, where we can have access to information automatically, we can demand and access so much because we're so privileged, but we've lost the joy of the journey, we've lost the joy of the exploration and the stumble and the figuring it out, because we're trying to avoid making mistakes, we're trying to avoid this feeling of failure. And that is where we need to hold ourselves with unconditional love. Is it is human to fall down, it is human to make mistakes, and that's where the unfortunately or fortunately the roughest times of my life where I've made mistakes, I've done something, I've suffered, have been the catalyst for growth and for change and transformation. And that again is a spiritual perspective, when you can look back, you know, and give thanks for those moments, as opposed to just trying to block them out of your experiences. Or didn't do that right, I'm going to cover it up, I'm not going to talk about it. So it's really challenging to sort of, I think, find, I just think spirituality, we were talking about this before, can be another tool that you beat yourself with in terms of where are you not measuring up, where are you not, you know, achieving or getting it right. And it really is the opposite. It's about allowing you to take your foot off the brake or the hands off the steering wheel, and just allow yourself the privilege of being human and making mistakes and making messes as you figure it out.
Yeah, I think because it all comes on down to how my judgment is. And it doesn't matter how spiritual I am or not spiritual I am. If I am a person that has very strong judgmental beliefs, and I know it's sometimes hard to admit, hey, I'm being very judgmental with myself right now. But that, you know, like that's when we that's what burdens us even more. And it doesn't matter, like, because I remember for myself, I went into a burnout, which is sort of like a depression because you're overdoing it at work, when I was still in my corporate world. But the thing is that I took it with me when I went on my spiritual journey, and I was beating myself up for things that's like, why? This is what makes me human. And it's so wonderful once you get into this mode of acceptance, and it's like, and suddenly you let go of things that you didn't like about yourself, but you weren't able to let them go before because you were holding on to this, you know, like, oh, it's so bad that I'm doing this. Yeah, I know, it's so bad.
For me, it's kind of learning to laugh at yourself and enjoy, you know, the messy side of like your inner child, but also just the mess of figuring stuff out. I've had very similar experiences to you, corporate burnout. And the thing that really irritated and shocked me the most was in a previous experience a few years ago, I was a yoga teacher and I had a yoga studio and I had 3 other jobs and I was making it work and I had no time. I was as busy, if not more busy, than I'd been in my very busy corporate experience. And I was setting up, I remember I sat blogging and I was writing about a workshop, and I was just giving myself such a hard time about taking time off. I didn't deserve holidays because I was self-employed and I was building a business. And I was just like struck by this realization that I was the worst boss I've ever had. And there was no one else I could blame. It wasn't like when I was employed and I could, you know, legitimately at times say they're being there's bad management and they're, you know, they're in a bad mood. This is about them, not about me. There was no one else to blame. And that's again another opportunity where I could say, oh, I don't like this aspect of me. I could ignore it, ignore that voice that's saying you're not being very kind and you could change this, or I can look into it and try and soften my approach with myself and use it as a growth opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, how you said it earlier. Yeah, like how we beat ourselves up all the time, always. Another thing that we were talking about earlier, and that I know you said it's okay for me to bring it into this episode, because I told you that I want to focus more on the whole thing of purpose in our lives and how to find purpose in everything. Because I find it is, or I think it's important for us to know our purpose so that we have goals, so that we have something to strive for, to live for, you know, because it gives us meaning. And I know that there's a special story with your purpose.
The games I've played with this, labeling. So purpose and finding your purpose has really had to change for me because it isn't a job title, it isn't fixed, and it isn't necessarily specific. So I'm going to try and keep this short. So I was a corporate lawyer in the system, job title, you know, didn't need to think, knew my identity, showed up, did the job, and burnt out. And then afterwards became a yoga teacher. And my yoga teacher training, with all serious and sincerity, it was like the light bulb moment. It was the first spiritual education that I'd had. And it really, I had mental health, you know, problems, I had burnout, depression, etc. And suddenly I was being told that there's another way to approach yourself and the world. And there was a more loving, connected way of really finding your purpose and sharing it and being of purpose. What I mean of being of purpose is being of service. You know, your purpose and being of purpose, I think we can get confused with those labels, because I am of purpose every minute of every day, regardless of whether I associate that with having a job title or a service, you know, whether I'm giving to other people. I'm still here, I'm still born, and I have a purpose, just as that birthright. But for me, this kind of game started because I was, I don't want to say I had PTSD from my corporate burnout, but because I don't want to be too inflammatory, but it was like, you know, coming from like a trauma victim to being like, how do I operate in the world? And all of it, you know, the trauma came with me. And I just wanted the refuge of what was known, but in a new world. So it's like, okay, now I'm a yoga teacher. I'm going to be a yoga teacher, and I'm going to do what all yoga teachers do. I'm going to build a studio. I'm going to build an empire. And this is going to be how I make my living, and I'm going to give back. And very quickly, you know, it was like a year and a half into being a busy yoga teacher. I started to realize something was happening to me through my practice. I was becoming devotional. And I also realized I didn't have time to go on yoga teacher trainings for myself or for immersions, so it was like it was becoming an exchange again. I showed up to teach yoga for other people, did my personal practice, but that was it. And yoga was this thing that I loved. So I had this intuitive calling, basically, when I was chanting to the divine feminine. And I just knew I needed to leave. I needed to quit my life again. And believe me, it was harder the second time. Trust that I needed to go and follow yoga and spiritual teachings for me and for what it was bringing up for me. So I lost my purpose, especially to the outside world and to people from, you know, the mainstream view, who saw me go from a lawyer to yoga teacher to then giving up teaching yoga, even though I claimed to like yoga. So everybody, including myself, was a bit like, what comes next? So I went back to India trying to find my purpose, because I didn't want to waste any more time not being in my purpose. And it was just this game that I now can sit and smile at, but it was really torturous, like chasing my purpose. And I had this horrible feeling that my next yoga teacher training wasn't going to give me the answer. I didn't feel like I was going to get the next certificate and be enlivened to go back and teach more yoga. And that is what happened. And then I had to follow this kind of intuitive call for chanting, for women's empowerment work through spiritual practice. And then it just suddenly, I just had to give up figuring it out and enjoy the privilege of having time to travel and immerse myself in spiritual practice. And that's when I started to call myself a spiritual seeker, because I still wanted the comfort of a name, of a label, of a purpose. You know, drifter was the other slightly unkind, you know, word that would play around in my mind. And it got to the point where I started reading tarot, and then I was like, well, is this what I'm doing? Is this my purpose? And by that stage, I mean, we're talking a couple of years on, I was just like, you know, I need to stop chasing this job title purpose and just trust that my purpose is to show up as a spiritual seeker and to embody it, to live it, to share it, because that's what I was doing. You know, I was always blogging or talking to people or sharing in community, and I was like, that's my purpose. And there are going to be different labels or different expressions of it as I continue to evolve. And for now, for me, that's been where I've had to get to in terms of defining my purpose, is actually to give up searching for it and just to allow, you know, my expression of spiritual connection to be my purpose, and actually to allow myself to be okay with not being on purpose, with purpose, of purpose, you know. So for me, I think that was like a healing from corporate living. I honestly do think when we change careers, when you go just from employed to self-employed, you really miss the structure and the safety net of employment. So I think for me, that's what I was using purpose and my search for purpose of. I was trying to feel safe in this unknown world, not only self-employed, but spiritual. And finally, I was beaten down to the point where I could just relax and say, my purpose is just to show up and do what makes me happy and to share what's from the heart. And at the moment, you know, it's with tarot and intuitive coaching, but it is really difficult when people say, what do you do? Because generally I just stop like a deer in the headlights now, and I'm like, I don't know, you know, because it's not as easy to say, yes, I'm Liz, I'm a lawyer, and I da 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 da. But again, it's all about identification and attachment to a sense of security. I think that's what my journey's been about, searching for purpose. It's been about identification and security, sense of self. So I just share that in case, I guess it's a check-in for people for why they're so desperate to be on purpose, to find their purpose, and also what they actually mean by that, because I've explored the nuances, you know, of what purpose really means for me.
I think that's one of I love that you're actually saying this, because I think it's so important before we even get started with anything, is to see, like, where do I stand with this? Like, what does it mean for me? What would the change of it mean for me? Because I mean, how much did your world change when you decided, okay, now my purpose is just to show up, you know?
It's, yeah, the pressure comes off, but you have to give yourself permission to take the pressure off. You know, we were just talking, you know, about being results driven. For me, finding my purpose was the result of all this inquiry. It was the reason why I fell off the corporate wheel. It was the reason why I didn't fit society anymore. It's the reason why I was being made to chase all these, you know, things that are actually gifts. And it, you know, for me, there's victim story about life happening to me and things being removed from me as a result of my spiritual awakening. And it's actually the total opposite. So yeah, I just think we really have to look at why we're chasing something, if we're chasing it. You know, we are here to live in our dharma, in our purpose, but it's a movable feast. There's a book by Stephen Cope, and I can't remember what it's called, but he talks about how your dharma can change. You know, for people of us that have children, your dharma for that period, the first, you know, few years of that child's life, your dharma is to be a parent for that child. And it's not to say nothing else is important to you. But I think we've, particularly in the West, we get so caught up with career identification that we attach that, you know, in as much in the spiritual world and the coaching world and the intuitive healing world, whatever it is. Yeah. And also we want to understand each other. We want to know what we stand for. So I think that's where purpose can be helpful, is we can communicate because we both know we're both coaches and we understand the purpose, you know, that we share in that. So it's not a bad thing. I'm just saying, like everything, we need to look at why we're chasing it. And it is, you know, I see a lot of people running, you know, retreats and courses will help you find your purpose, will help you find your calling. Well, I've been trying to find it, you know, since 2015. And for me, it was a game, it was a loop, it was a chase. And the minute that I stopped and just took the pressure off to be finding something more than I had, then I just started to enjoy myself a lot more. And I started to find more pleasure, you know, in just exploring where I'm at. You know, if I can use the tarot as an example, it's a new skill, it's a new gift. And the thing I've had to learn with it is to walk before you run, you know, and to enjoy this phase of exploration, to just be playful and enjoy it. And it doesn't matter how many people are or are not having readings with me or watching my YouTube channel. What matters is what I'm getting out of it and what it's developing for me. And that's the purpose of it. It's not to earn me money, although that would be nice. You know, and I do think we need to have fair exchange of value for our services. I don't want to demean that. But it's about looking at what this is really, what is the purpose of this? And it's not necessarily that I will be, you know, the next YouTube tarot sensation. It's not about that. It's just about what is it letting me express and experience in the now.
Yeah, following the inner calling, right? What wants to be created through you right now in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love,
rather than worrying what it's going to lead to.
Yeah.
Trying to make it be more too soon.
Yeah, and I love it because it always comes back to the labels we use, the pressure we put on ourselves. Like you said earlier, even the spiritual thing can be something, even our search for a purpose can be something that breaks us, that actually, you know, like, because we're so bent on it, we have to. And I always like to use because it always comes down to this pressure we put on ourselves. And I think it's, what's his name again? Confucius, that says, if you're in a hurry, go slow.
Mm-hmm.
And if you need to get somewhere very fast, take the walk around. And I think that's such a great picture that I've noticed with my clients and with everything. A lot of the times, the biggest block, the biggest, how do you say, challenge that we have that actually holds us back from anything, like whatever we want to achieve in life, is the pressure we put on ourselves. It's the pressure, and it's just ourselves. It's no one else. No one else is putting that pressure on us. It's just ourselves.
But it's us programmed by systems, and I think there's like a process for me in terms of you see the patterns, you have to take responsibility for it and change it. And it is difficult to work in a different dynamic to the way that the world is currently geared up, to support. And it's finding forgiveness for what you were told that wasn't true, and then taking responsibility for that it is hurting you to work in that way. I for one, I'm still in limbo land. I've been having to look over the last few years, well, will I get another job, a normal day job to help, because there are financial realities about being in this world. So it's not, you don't always find the answers straight away with, say, spiritual services, but it's about being realistic and understanding is you've got to be grounded and safe as you move through the world, but it's not to do that from fear, and say that is the only way that you can operate. And there is just this dance, I think, when you break away between the old system and finding the new, because there aren't as many role models as there are for the old method. But it's an interesting time to have this conversation, obviously, because I for one have been watching people I know who've been told that they could have no flexibility in their working lives to suddenly having total flexibility because the world has gone crazy with the virus, and no one can operate as normal. So everything's possible, I guess, is what I'm trying to say with that. You just have to give yourself permission to do things differently and to trust that it can work. And the trust, that's a big thing for me. I've always wanted the certificate at the end, like the qualification or just the proof, to get to the finish line and be like, I want to know that I'm on the right path. And it doesn't work like that. You just have to keep putting one step in front of the other and trusting that you're on the right path. You're moving in the right direction. And it's scary at times.
I love that you're saying this, because I was born into a German society, and German society is so much I'm going to say used to, because I think it's changing right now, but it used to be so much on, if you have this paper, then you're important, then you're and even for spiritual things, they have certificates, and you can. And I remember, like, I had 3 tries of going into university, getting a degree. And there was always something that came up that I couldn't be there or couldn't even finish.
Oh, interesting.
I had, like, the shamanic teacher that I had, when I started with him, he was like, because I remember him trying to get me into the first training from some of you guys know Foundation for Shamanic Studies used to, I don't know if it's still very good, but it used to be a very big on shamanism all over the world. And he was a counselor in that system. And we were trying to put me into the training, getting myself in there in the first basic, because then he could teach me the rest, because that was their laws for me to get me. And we couldn't, like, there were always something coming in between. And so he was like, okay, I can teach you, but I can't, probably not going to be able to give you a certificate for it ever. So it's like, I always had to go through things where it's like, I wanted certificates, but the world was telling me, nah, you don't need them.
I've had story with that too, because I was a lawyer, so I had so many professional qualifications and things that the society, myself and parents and everything, everybody was really proud of the work and the achievement and the establishment that I was part of. And when I became a yoga teacher, I went to an accredited yoga course and was really like, if I'm going to do this, I want to make sure that it's accredited, that I've got a certificate, because then this is real. The tarot has been a completely different experience. It just sort of, it's the first time really I've been able to, or allowed myself to in my life, to just allow something to organically happen. So I was just I never really knew what I was doing with it. Like, I bought cards. I bought Osho's deck when I did my training, first yoga teacher training in Rishikesh in 2015. And I would read from the book for friends. I never really used it for myself. The cards are quite out there, and I was like, never really thought anything of it. And then in 2017, when I left again, I took them with me because I was like, I'm going to spend some time journaling. I'm going to pull cards for myself and have more time for a 3-hour spiritual practice in the morning. So I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And then again, it was something I was doing with a friend. And weirdly, I gave her the Osho cards and said, do you know what? You seem to like them more than me. I'm gonna invest in a new tarot deck. So I bought a deck, and it had like a book. So I was sort of working with the book. And then my friend who had given the cards to, she'd signed up for an online intuitive tarot course. It's like a 21-day thing, an hour a day. And she's like, I've started doing it. I'm not resonating. I think I've bought it for you. So I then logged on and was like, this is amazing. And it's all about storytelling and like using your intuition with the cards as opposed to any traditional learned meaning, which for me, to go from a system where there are precedents, there are authorities, there are traditions, there's right and there's wrong and there's discussion, suddenly I was like, you just pick up a card and say how you feel. And then I was doing readings for my friend with the deck, and she'd be like, this is really good. And I was like, yeah. And I kind of got to the point where I was like, maybe I should test myself. Maybe I should do one blind on someone I don't know. And her housemate, who we were remote, I was in Copenhagen and she was in India, and she's like, well, my housemate would like a reading. And straight away, this very personal storyline came up about a deceased parental figure. I don't want to say too much because it's still someone's personal information. And I was just reading the cards, and I'm talking into my phone, and I'm like, this has got really heavy, really personal, really quick. And also, I don't know if it's true. So my mind is going crazy saying, this is all nonsense. What are you talking about? You're embarrassing yourself. Anyway, I send it off to the friend, and I'm like, give me feedback. And I'm like really nervous, thinking this is embarrassing. She's going to come back and be like, what are you talking about? And the friend came back and was like, you're completely spot on. And I don't know how you know what you know. And it was really helpful reading. And it was then that I did 5. So I had clients following me from my yoga whilst I was traveling. So I put a thing on Facebook and said, first 5 people to message me will get a free reading because I'm, learning this. And again, I got good feedback from them. And within the next week, I'd started offering it. And still now, I just shared with you, I have new people who come to me who I don't know, and they'll come through social media. So there's no way of knowing who they are and their status, whatever it is. And even now, I still have that voice saying, this is rubbish, you're making it up. And I'll get the feedback and the validation that it's completely on point. And this is what I shared with you, is it's the trust in the universe and the trust in myself as a vessel, as opposed to what a qualification gives you is the sense of that you've achieved it and that it's you controlling the outcomes. It's you in charge of the process. And intuitive living and spiritual practice is all about becoming a vessel and a channel and giving up the need to control the learning and the outcomes. Yes, you still have to study. Like, I'm studying astrology and I have to show up and use my mind. But my teacher, my astrologist, she said to me, you're going to learn all this and then you're going to let it go because it's going to become intuitive. And I was like, but it's this different way of living and connecting with information, of trusting that knowledge comes through you. And that is different to saying the answers on page 43 of a textbook, And I do think back to a lot of my exams that I've taken over the years, and there have been so many, particularly as a lawyer, and some of them would be open book, and all you're really doing is memorizing where the information is so you can regurgitate it in a tested hour of time. And I'm like, what is that really showing you? And for me, as someone who's intellectual, who's done things by the book for years, the tarot for me has been a real revelation in terms of trusting my intuitive sense and my emotions, my emotional body. Sometimes I'll feel physically different when I'm doing a reading, and every time I put my faith in it and say it, I'll get the validation back from a client that they've been having pains in their shoulders or headaches or whatever. So it's just, for me, it's an extraordinary way of connecting and having another form of intelligence, I guess.
I know, definitely. I can confirm that 100%, because I used to have it the same way when I was doing guided meditations. It was like, I remember the first, because I mean, one of the feedbacks that I got a week before I went online for the very first time for a guided meditation was of a friend. Well, not of, I wouldn't say friend, but someone I know, that told me, your voice isn't good enough, you need to speak differently, and like you have to do everything differently. And I remember, and that was a week before, so I had a whole week to go through that, working through, oh my God. And then 2 hours before I went live, one of my friends actually said, you know what, who cares, you want to have the people listening to you that actually like you the way you are, you don't want to have to change anything about it. And that gave me a little piece. And then when I started digging into the Hawaiian philosophy is where I learned it's going to be there, who needs to be there, it's going to be said what needs to be said, and it's going to happen what needs to happen, and it's going to take as long as it needs to take, and that's it. And once you go into that acceptance, it's like, yeah, this is the true surrender. It's like, yeah, I'm not the one guiding it. And that's why should I bother to even think about it? It's like, it's going to happen, whatever needs to happen. And yeah, if it's supposed to trigger someone, it's going to trigger someone. If it's supposed to give someone help, hope, and it's going to do that. And it's going to happen what needs to happen.
Yeah, and you've just got to show up in your truth at that time. That's purpose.
Exactly. Yeah.
And not to, for me, my ego has definitely struggled. I care very much about being respected for what I do and external validation. I'm a people pleaser. I always say I'm a recovered people pleaser, but I'm still a people pleaser. I still watch and see how many likes do I get from my videos, how many subscribers have I got, and I know it doesn't matter. I know actually what brings me contentment and makes me feel on purpose or of purpose is making a difference to someone, not thousands of people, not millions. I would like to be financially sustainable in what I do, and I think there is a need to think big and step out and stand in your presence and your power. But I do think it's really easy in the spiritual world to still fall into the Western mindset, patriarchal, consumerist, commercial, capitalism mindset of you've got to have this profile, you've got to be big on social media, you've got to have, thousands of people liking and following you in order to have impact. And it's not true. And it's about finding that deeper, sense of purpose away from the noise, because it is all noise. And that's why, the one-to-one I actually really love. And there's only so much you can do with that. It uses energy, it uses time. And I'd rather know that I've shown up and given one person the best of me than 1,000 people, something that, I don't know, just doesn't have the same essence or not commitment, because, it's the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Like if you're putting out videos or content because you want to see, you're doing it because you're trying to boost your numbers, or you're doing it to look the part, it's not authentic to me, as an offering. And I have resonated in my spiritual path with people who have just been, true to themselves and not caring about the noise. So it's been an interesting point of my this discovery is to be of purpose regardless of any external validation or external validation of success.
Yeah, and that's why this podcast was created, because I love interviewing people, and I also love talking about things about personal development. And if I can reach some people with it, it's amazing. So that's why. No, so definitely I know what you mean. And I also know, I mean, it is wonderful if we can touch many, many people. And I hope that this podcast reaches a lot of people out there, of course, because I feel that I am so grateful for all the wonderful people like you that I'm able here to interview here. But I definitely know that, especially like the one-on-one coachings, it's so wonderful to be able to like concentrate on one person. You don't have to think about time, because I think if you go into masses, it's like, okay, I have 30 minutes, and then the next one in 30 minutes, and then next one, and if you just concentrate on a few, but you're able to,
Yeah.
like really give everything to these few, it's so wonderful. It's, yeah, I know what you mean.
That realization came to me in my first online coaching call. And partly it was like, well, I need to earn money from this. There needs to be a fair value exchange. And I wanted, well, I did it for free, the first one, because I was getting used to all the technology required, which actually was an error, because I think people are less committed and less likely to show up unless they've put some money or financial investment behind it. I just think it's an energy exchange that's needed. But I had go on.
Sorry, and especially because you're just saying that, and because I especially noticed, and even if it's too little, it's an investment you do for yourself. It's not that we're receiving the energy, you're receiving that energy as well when you're making that payment, because for you it's worth it to actually put the work into it.
Yeah
As a side note.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I still struggle with pricing of things. It's just a dance I think we have to do, and understand that that's part of our spiritual practice. Our relationship with money is a whole other thing that we that we could talk about. But yeah, so I had on the list, I had between 7 and 10 people who'd said they were coming to this coaching call, and I was like, fantastic, that's a success. I'm going to have 10 faces potentially looking at me, and we're going to share. And then when it came onto the call, only 2 showed up. And, I'm holding space for other people, but I also have to observe my own process. And I was like, I felt disappointment, I felt unsettled, I felt like I'd failed. And all of that, was there. And then we just connected. I did a deep breath. We did an I can't remember, just to, that's how I need to make sure I can then focus. And then I did the call with these 2 beautiful women, and it was an hour and a half. It went like that. I was physically drained afterwards from holding space, from being there for them. And then the feedback they gave me was that they'd never had the opportunity to really provide and exchange, their stories, and they'd never had the space held in the way that only 2 people on a call would allow. Mm-hmm. So you have that group feeling where it's not just one-on-one, and it's not too personal, too intimate. You are getting other people's perspectives, but it wasn't so big that there wasn't time or space for everybody to be heard. So I was, and again, it was this aha moment of, what do I want to offer people? Like, what am I really getting just having 9 people potentially silent looking back at me as I do all the talking? Or do I want to facilitate an exchange and, a flowing conversation where everybody's participating and lifting each other up? So it was a really interesting thing, again, of what you think about when you see these big coaches or big, successful people who've got millions and thousands of people. That's maybe what that, that's their purpose. That's what they're meant to be doing. But it doesn't mean you're failing if you're not hitting the same criteria.
Exactly.
The same outgoings.
I think it's so funny how you're saying that, because I set up a membership site for my German clients as well, and of course with the hope of getting in as many people as possible. And in the end, it's, I think, 8 regulars, or I think now it's even less. I think now it's six people regularly there. Every 2 weeks we have the group call. And what I love about it is what you said. It's like, I can actually take the time for each one of them. Like, I don't even have to time it. It's like, I'm just there for them. I hold the space. They can interact a little bit with each other, but we can actually give each one of them the focus. Not like, now it's you, let's talk about it, let's see what you need. And it wouldn't be possible if I would have like 100 people, like you said, staring at me, going like,
yeah,
or maybe even cooking. Like, I would be the one, cooking while I'm listening. And so that definitely that does a lot of things. But I think it's also, again, I think it also depends on what your calling is. I do believe when I watch people like Gabby Bernstein, maybe you know her, or
she was Mel Robbins in my mind.
Right, Mel Robbins. I don't know if you know Mel Robbins, or Brené Brown. I love Brené Brown with all the authenticity, and those people, like, I mean, they really move thousands of people around there, and it doesn't mean that we're not moving 1,000 people. It's just that we don't see them because we don't, offer that kind of. It's not our calling to do that kind of work like that.
Well, yeah, but you're also disconnecting yourself. So it's the comparison piece that we talked about at the start of this conversation. Is if you put anybody on a pedestal as being, the right version of a coach or a public speaker, it's nothing to do with them. What you're actually doing is devaluing or disconnecting with your experience now. Who knows, where you and I will be in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. Who knows who anybody will be, because the Gabby Bernsteins and the Brené Browns, they started small too. But the problem, I think, with, I suppose, social media and comparison is you're always chasing something else rather than just honoring where you're at. And to use my example, I could have spent that coaching call really in a space of, I've not had enough people, this has been a failure. Or you have the choice to step in and say, well, what is right in front of me and what can I connect with? And to really engage, like you said, with your 8 members, and to keep that connection true and real. And regardless of any story or comparison that you're making with whether that's enough, of a result or of a service,
Yeah, and it's incredible because on the other hand, it's amazing. They show up all the time. They're there. They're, like, it's so great because it's become this community for us. I mean, of course, now it's all of us holding the space together for it, right? Yeah.
And I do think as I don't know, as people who are learning how to facilitate, don't you want to get your training wheels? I'm telling myself this. Don't you want to walk before you run? You don't ride a bike necessarily without stabilizers. So to go from 0 to an auditorium of 2,000 people, you're not necessarily going to give your best work. And it's about, as we said, honoring the journey, honoring the process, being humble, and knowing that it's all happening at the right time and the right way that it should be. And you said it before, surrender to the process is so important, rather than thinking, what is this working towards? Yes, I do think it's important to have like a manifestation vision board and have goals, but not to get attached to that being why you're doing what you're doing, because it takes you out of the present, to be thinking, oh, this is the step that I must take to get to the next level. And just enjoy, where you're at. And if you are teaching to thousands of people, then, and you enjoy it, and that's your highest excitement, then keep doing it. It's not to say that's bad. It's just, I think a lot of us who are doing things on a more community grassroots level, think that that's the, I suppose, the pathway. Like with lawyers, you start off as a trainee and then you become a partner. There's like a hierarchy that we've always got to, a linear approach to all of these things, and it's not linear. It's actually just looping and looping. Yeah.
Oh yes, definitely. Liz, this was so wonderful. This was so beautiful, and I know we could go on and on and on, but then this episode is going to be too long, so we're gonna have to. I'm gonna put all your links in the show notes, but just for those who want to listen to it, what's your main page, or what's your main social media channel where they can follow you?
Yeah, so I offer regular general YouTube tarot readings on embodied feminine energy, and I'm also relatively active on Instagram and Facebook, and again it's embodied feminine energy. So they're my current pages where I'm sharing just tarot, or just like, as I say, spiritual perspective as we go through these interesting times. So my coaching information is also available on the social media pages.
Perfect. And we're going to put everything in the show notes so you guys can find it, definitely.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, this was so exciting. Thank you so much for being here. This was really amazing. We need to do this more often.
It was a lot of fun.
Definitely. Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for tuning in, and have a great time. I think, we're going to be posting this probably today. So I wish you all a great weekend. And if you guys want to have really good tarot readings, or just wonderful coachings that have to do with, that are guided through tarot, come and find Liz.
Thank you, my dear.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.